independent. You know it. You love it. You can't live without it. Rockland World Radio.
Welcome to Divine Dialogue, heard on Rockland World Radio every other Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And now the hosts of Divine Dialogue, Lisa A. Howard and Teresa Winnicky.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to This or Better's Divine Dialogue. Today is Monday, February 24th, and we are very happy to be back with you again. Joining us again tonight is our wonderful co-host, Jan Shashin of Massage in Motion and Centers for Spiritual Living, Rockland County. So again, thank you for joining us. Today's conversation, today's dialogue, I should say, is centered around self-esteem and aspiring to reach our goals and how we go about doing that, how self-esteem plays, what role self-esteem plays in the pursuit of our goals, or ultimately the success of attaining them. So I'm happy to say that our Reach Resolution Success 2014 class is now 2 weeks into the program. And it's some wonderful, wonderful content. I know that I'm having some wonderful aha moments and really deep reflection as a result of it. It's the third time I'm doing this particular work. And I think our students have, on our power calls, have attested to the same, that they too are
having some breakthroughs.
Breakthroughs, and particularly, I think that you can agree with me or not, hopefully you will, that this particular part of our workshop is really focusing on self-esteem.
Yes, it does, and it's really pretty prevalent that there is a lot of low self-esteem in all ages. I mean, it's not just for the young at heart. It's for every age, and I think people battle with that. And I think a lot of the parts of alcoholism, drug addiction, being sexual at an early age, and
eating disorders, procrastination, a lot of that has to do with the low self-esteem that one has of themselves. They don't value themselves for whatever the reason is. They don't value themselves, and hence cannot then go on to perform at their highest level, because there's always question, doubt, anxiety, fear that's associated with, will I do okay? Will people like me? Whatever the conversation is. Will fire alarms go on when I'm talking? That is the blessing of our show. Every time we're on the show, the fire alarm goes.
We thank our gentlemen and ladies in service.
Yes, we do.
And maybe the fire alarm is a beautiful demonstration of the alarm that should go off in our own heads.
You're so good at that.
On the news, I am my own firehouse, trust me. On the news today, when they talked about Dr. What is his name? He treats the stars. He has a reality show.
Dr. Phil?
Drew.
Dr. Drew.
I don't know Dr. Drew.
Dr. Drew is a celebrity. There is a reality
addiction
show. It's about, he's an addiction doctor, and he works with people who have all of the ailments that you talked about, or addictions, I should say. And it turns out that his I think she's 21 now, 21-year-old daughter has just explained that she has an eating disorder. And it's interesting to see that self-esteem issues are prevalent, as you said, across the board, and social status doesn't dictate whether you do or you don't. Oftentimes,
country of origin, culture.
Absolutely. And so here is a young girl, a beautiful young girl, living a very nice life. Her father's a doctor and a successful show, so money and affluence is no issue. And she's battling an eating disorder. And whatever addiction it is, it comes from and stems from our self-esteem, either the lack thereof or a total absence.
Right.
Yes. Right? As most times our value is placed on what we do, the role we play, the title, what we look like, whether we're skinny, whether we think we're pretty, the clothes, and so on. So with that, I want to say that, of course, I wish Dr. Drew's daughter the very best, and the first big move in achieving self-esteem is to recognize the alarm. So when that fire alarm goes off, and obviously for this young lady it did, and so she's working on those issues now.
Does he work them out? I don't know about her daughter, but on this show, does he help them work it out so it's a model for other people to
I've
follow?
only seen the show a couple of times, but apparently the show is more or less a camp. So you sign on and you come there with your addiction and your commitment, your resolve to work on that. And they spend anywhere from, I'm not sure, Jan, if you know more than I do about it, but I think it's anywhere from 6 weeks to 16 weeks.
I don't know if I've ever actually seen the show. I'm aware of it, but, I mean, they've had some of the names like Mackenzie Phillips and Gary Busey and a few others that
Right.
Yeah, so most people, I think, don't know
want to
that
display their addiction in public
get paid for it.
and get paid for it.
So most people really don't know that self-esteem doesn't come from the outside. People try to get it from the outside through
Right.
validation of whatever it is. Some people do it through workaholism, another ism. It's not just drugs and alcohol,
Right.
but they throw themselves into their work trying to prove that they're good at something to get acceptance. But
Which is also an addiction. It just happens to be a
Yes.
socially acceptable one.
there you go.
Right. And it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop with the obvious addictions. Sometimes the tougher challenge, and I've said this to my daughter before, it's sometimes so clear when someone has an alcohol problem or a drug problem. The problem is on the surface. It's right there for everyone to see. But there are more subtle esteem issues, relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Constantly attracting or maintaining relationships that don't support your highest and best. That in and of itself is a demonstration of a self-esteem issue when we subject ourselves to relationships that do not nurture and support us.
Right. Stay in them.
Well,
And we stay
if-
there. We stay
If you
stuck.
want to get into the true self-esteem issue, having a relationship with yourself that's not serving you.
Wow, that's a big one.
Which in many ways, if you want to go back to Reach, ladies, this is where we are, where we really are. When we as students read some of that material, a lot of that is about our own relationship to self and building our self-esteem with ourselves. And, it's so easy, so facile to say it. And it's hard work. It's life's work to do it. So,
Right. And there
it's,
isn't a camp we can just go to and be
Well, we can go to
miraculously
Reach now.
healed.
We go to
You
Camp
go to a
Reach.
Reach workshop,
Yeah.
and Teresa and I will coach and facilitate a workshop that will help you fix and heal,
Recover
Let's
yourself.
think of all of the
words, yes.
all of the words to associate. But the point is, just like Dr. Drew's daughter, she stepped up to the plate, she recognized it, she acknowledged it, and now she's ready to work on it. So
That's always the hardest
it's the first
part,
step, right?
The
Yeah.
awareness of it, the awareness
Absolutely.
that it's
First
not
step is be
helping
aware.
you.
Yeah.
Right. And for someone like her to be in the political, to be in the public eye, and then to take the scrutiny. Oh, well, Dr. Drew, how come Dr. Drew's daughter, if Dr. Drew is so good, then how come his daughter, because it knows no prejudice.
Yeah.
Self-esteem issues affect everyone on this planet at one point or another. Even the most confident people, successful people today, weren't always so confident and successful. They started somewhere. They had fears, they had doubts, and they had to work on them. So
And that's exactly what we're approaching in week 3 of Reach, of our resolution success, talking about what are those successful formulas that people have that who are successful, who are doing the work that they want to do in the work at the level that they're doing it.
right.
So that's what we're coming at. in
Even
week
the
3.
Olympics. I have enjoyed watching the Olympics. And I cried for some of the athletes because I could feel their pain, in not performing to the level that they apparently wanted to perform. And I just thought, just to be at the Olympics, to have made it that far,
Amongst these
the resolve that goes into
Yeah.
making it to the Olympics, and then to see them perform their hearts out, So I was crying and laughing and cheering, and I was feeling all of those emotions.
perform their hearts out and have the courage to get up in front of the billions of people who are tuning in to watch them. I mean, pretty, if you're not in the right state of mind, that stress of what people are thinking of you could really put you under.
Right.
So hopefully when Coach Selby calls, he could talk about how his athletes do that. simply do that, get on the
Right.
court and perform at a high level no matter what.
And speaking of which, the American skater, tall, blonde hair, I wish I could remember his name. It was the singles. And he fell and slammed into the wall surrounding the ring. And he was down. This wasn't, so many of them, there was a slight flaw in their performance.
Right.
It was amazing how they just immediately picked up and just went with it. This gentleman not only fell, but into the wall, and he was down for a while, and the audience started cheering, and his arm came up, and he slowly pulled himself.
Aww.
So I think that that's a beautiful introduction to Coach Selby's call, who is calling in right now. We can talk about the role self-esteem plays in the athlete as well as life's athlete. And that's the folks like you and I who are striving for a better life and reaching for those goals. So, good evening. Is this the mysterious Coach Selby?
We have made it. Yes.
Coach Selby does exist. Well,
Yeah.
Good evening, Coach. Thank
Good
you for
evening.
taking the time to call in.
Thank you.
So, have you had a moment to listen to the conversation that we've started thus far, or are you en route right now?
I am finally sitting still in the office, and I haven't heard a thing.
You haven't heard a
So,
thing. Okay, well that's
If you
perfect.
could get me up to speed, that would be great.
Well, I have introduced you several times in the past as the coach of, and I will let you introduce yourself, and you can tell us the Coach Selby of Elevate. And what it is you do. But our conversation this evening is about self-esteem. It's actually about the mindset of an athlete, whether it's on your basketball court or what we call one of life's athletes, and that's just the regular Joe Schmo or Tom, Dick, and Harry who is looking to achieve a greater sense of life, a greater expression of life. And many of our participants in our workshops are doing exactly that. They are the athletes that are trying to reach for a greater expression. So why don't you introduce yourself, Coach, and tell us about Elevate.
Okay. So my name's Coach Selby, and I am a mental game coach. And I specialize in assisting athletes to learn how to mentally focus themselves so that they can improve their performance. Here down in Delray Beach, Florida, we have 50 athletes. We have basketball players, baseball players, and lacrosse athletes who are working to improve their skills so that they can go to college. And in my world, everybody that has a body is an athlete. And that's my approach, no matter if they play a sport or they, like you shared earlier, live their life. And so what my focus is to help them to come up with some coordinated systems of techniques that they can use to help convert stress into energy that can help them perform better, which we'll talk about more as we go along. How's that for an introduction?
I think it's perfect. And I love that you are a mental coach, the mind game. How did you describe yourself? You are a coach, and you coach the mindset of the athletes.
Yes, a mental game plan.
A mental game plan. Coach, when you and I met, and then shortly thereafter, we've had a couple of conversations about, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I've told my co-host this several times, and thank you for showing up today, because she knows it's not a figment of my imagination. But
Hi, co-host.
this is Teresa and Jan.
Hello.
Good
Hi,
evening.
Teresa and
So-
Jan. Nice to meet you both.
Coach, we talked about that you have a questionnaire that not only your athletes, and I thought that this was very, very interesting, not only your athletes take this questionnaire or this evaluation, I'll let you explain what it was, but I believe that both the parents and the athlete complete this series of questions that ultimately help you understand where they are at that moment. As far as
Correct.
attitude, is that correct?
Correct. So here's what happens. there's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Tutko, and 30 years ago, he was the first sports psychologist. And he would go in to these professional teams and he would say, take my 3-hour mental assessment and take my 3-hour assessment, and then I would be able to tell you which athletes are good and which athletes are going to tank. And that assessment was really intimidating to not only the coaches, but the players. And so it was misused. So what the mental game plan is, as I'm having a brain freeze here. So the mental game, what we did with the mental game plan was we condensed that 3-hour assessment to 42 questions, which takes about 20 minutes. Those 42 questions are designed to help an athlete get clear on their behavior traits and their emotional traits. So what are some of the behavior traits that we look at? We look at how well do you compete? How committed are you? How assertive are you? And we look at the emotional traits, how confident you are, what level of concentration you bring to a situation, how well do you deal with controlling your emotions, and how well do you handle pressure. And then once those 42 questions are done, you get a booklet, and inside that booklet there's a chart. And that chart kind of gives you an actual readout of where you are. And from there, we begin to look at where you need improvement, where you are average, where you are above average.
Coach, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I come from, my children play a lot of sports, so my husband's very competitive also. And what's the difference, or how can you observe that on the court? What do you see that differentiates? Set aside the test that you give them, but when someone's on the court, how do you assess the ones that will make it and the ones that will tank under the pressure?
Great question. It's in the subtleties of body language, actually. If an athlete misses a shot, what happens immediately will determine how they're going to respond.
Right.
Does their head go down, or do they use one of the techniques that we teach called clearing or stoppage? So there's a gentleman here who's 18 years old, and he doesn't practice like he plays. And so when he plays, he gets frustrated because his performance is not up to the standard that he believes that it should be. And that causes frustration. So I've been working with him in the gym to learn how to clear the mistakes that are not useful, and how to affirm the things that are useful. And so as a coach, I'm watching for the subtlety of what is this athlete doing? What is the athlete saying to themselves? Are they saying, man, I'm a jerk, I'm no good, I suck? Or are they saying, clear, next shot, I'm a shooting machine, I am a closer, I still do this? So I'm looking at what's the inner dialogue that's taking place.
Right. Very much like the curriculum that Teresa and I have prepared for our REACH workshops. This particular workshop that we're working on for 2014, the beginning, is we have titled REACH Resolution Success. And all of the workshops, Coach, that Teresa and I facilitate start with the acronym for REACH. The first, obviously, is R, and that is for recognizing, which is, I think, what you're saying about the assessment. You start with the assessment. You recognize where you are, what it is you want to change, or what your strengths, to your point, the strengths and the weaknesses, or in terms of conditions of someone's life, it's really just where they are. And then from a mental perspective, we would go on to E, and we would examine how the conditions or what it is we're recognizing, the impact that they're having on our life. I mean, it can go, we could really exhaust the whole acronym, but the reality of it is that you recognize where you're at, you examine what's working and what's not, you examine what you own and what you've adopted, you then acknowledge what's working for you and what isn't. We then go, most importantly, it's a shame that the C came as the fourth letter in the word reach, but it's about self-care. It's really about taking care of ourselves, not just from a physical perspective, but more than anything, a mental, because we believe, I know that you and I have had this discussion from my perspective as a Science of Mind practitioner, but for Teresa's as well as a coach, a life mastery coach, that the mind controls everything, and the conditions of our lives, be it on the court or in the court of life, are a mirror reflection of what's going on in your head.
Outer experience is a reflection of inner reality.
Exactly. And so H would be, having and harnessing faith, and how you do that.
Okay.
So
that's beautiful.
I think that now the acronym changes. It's interesting because in this particular workshop, the acronym remains the same. It's still REACH, but it's beautiful to see what is morphing out of. You'd have to see all of the worksheets that I've created for the weeks to come. And it begins a dialogue. The idea in creating this curriculum is to engage ourselves in an inner dialogue that supports our vision and our aspirations. But it always comes down to self-esteem. So I would like you to share a little bit now on nothing in this world. I wholeheartedly believe this. Nothing in this world can be achieved without a level of self-esteem.
Yes, totally.
Even on just a fundamental level. So
for sure. I love the Dalai Lama.
Dalai Lama.
And the Dalai Lama, somebody walked up to him and said, thank you for coming to our presentation. We really appreciate you being here, and we would love it if you talk about self-esteem. And he looked up, and he looked really confused, like, what is this self-esteem thing that you're talking about? And so the person went to try to explain to him, like, well, it's how a person esteems themselves, it's how they feel about themselves. And I love his answer, and it was like, be happy. And so I never forgot that story from him, because that's really what self-esteem, what I've found to simplify this is be happy. And what do we need to do as athletes, what do we need to do as fine, evolving people to be happy? And as long as we stay aligned with that happiness, then our esteem, the way that we see ourselves and the way that we perceive ourselves won't be affected. And I see that a lot with the athletes here. I mean, they're 17, 18-year-old young men. And so if a coach says something that in essence attacks or they perceive as an attack on their esteem, they automatically tank.
They automatically what?
Tank.
They tank. So by tanking, I mean they say, well, maybe I do suck. Maybe I'm not as good as I think I am.
Right. They start to buy into the criticism.
Exactly.
So how do you support? I'm trying to find the right. I know the question I want to ask.
Okay.
How do you support and nurture the self-esteem with a young, especially with 18 and 17-year-olds? I mean, adults do it. I'm 51 years old, and I still have my work to do. But if we are always comparing ourselves, these young men are comparing themselves to whom? Where does the power to make that shot? Where does that come from? Who are they relying on, and so on? Do you understand what I'm saying? Because we all compare ourselves to something. We unite with something. What are these young men uniting themselves with, and where is it that they think that this power comes from?
Well, that's an interesting question, because actually they don't know. and they are so malleable. They can be impressed upon. So it's sort of like a pseudo confidence that they're believing in. And so what my role is, I have two roles. My role is as individuals, as spiritual beings, I am here to nurture them, no matter what. My only function is forgiveness and to help them to really understand, to keep loving who they are.
Right.
As a basketball coach, you got to move your butt. You need to lose weight. You got to sprint those sprints harder. You need to work harder on defense. You need to close out better. You need to make sure you box out. So there are two dynamics that are at work here. And so they have to learn, and I've been trying to share with a few of them, that who you are is not what you do.
That's exactly what I had written down.
Right, absolutely. And you make such a great point. You know, that on one hand, you're here to nurture them, not only from a spiritual perspective, but they rely on you. It's a coach. There's a relationship and a bond that's being built. And then on the other hand, it's, step it up and get in here and practice and do your work. And I think that's one of the reasons why I really wanted you to be a guest on the show, because I wanted to outline the synergy between these young 17 and 18-year-old athletes that most of them I saw as very confident when I met these young men. I saw confidence in them, and I was so impressed by their willingness to go out on that court and do the very best. And then on the one hand, my heart as a mother was, these kids, their goal is to get into college. And there's so much riding on their performance at a game, but it's the synergy with whether it's an athlete, 17-year-old on a basketball court, or a 40-year-old woman who's trying, or man who's trying to change their life and grow not only in their career, but most of the world today, when you talk about a resolution and the new year comes and the resolution is I'm going to quit smoking, I want a better job, I want more money, I want the material changes show up, and it's unusual that they will look inside of themselves first and see that there's a mental shift that takes place for any one of those resolutions to be a success.
Totally. And that's the game of life right there, is being able to mentally navigate this landscape that we're in. And I get to witness that these young people aren't really prepared. Nobody's really taught us how to navigate the mental landscape. Nobody's taught us the power of self-forgiveness. Nobody's taught us the tools of self-nurturing. Nobody's taught us the importance of self-talk.
Right.
I mean, I witness this all the time. I mean, a kid could joke in a jokingly way, say, man, I suck. But then his subconscious mind doesn't know the difference and believes him.
Right.
So, Coach, how do you help them then go from a lack of self-esteem into esteeming themselves?
Well, let's look at the word confidence. In the word confidence, you have with, kind,
Right.
and FID, fidelity. So it's learning how to be truthful to oneself, confidence. So being true to oneself. So that's where it kind of starts. Right? That's the meaning of confidence. So confidence is being able to learn how to basically trust oneself. So what does that look like in the game?
Right.
Shoot the shots that you practice. So we
Right.
go in the gym, and I teach. I'm like, look, this is a game shot. Learn how to shoot this shot in the game so that you can be confident with this shot. Shoot this free throw so that you can be confident that you know you can make the free throw. Now, do they pay attention to what I say? 50% of the time.
Well, they're 17 and 18.
Right, they know everything.
Yeah, there's a program that we have to probably delete that they came here with. That says
Right.
they only have to agree half the time.
Right, it's that.
If that.
Yeah, I mean, what do you see when you talk to, your clients in your workshop? I mean, what kind of self-talk are they bringing forward?
Well, we have one of our workshop participants here with us, as a matter of fact. So who better to hear that from than Jan?
All right.
Well, I have 7 decades almost of self-talk. So.
I am listening.
He's listening, Jan.
You're listening. How do you turn it around? I think one of the things we said already was awareness. The first step is always awareness, being aware of what you've been doing to yourself. Never mind what the institutions or the authority figures or anything else out there you have blamed. Start getting real with yourself, start getting truthful, start looking deep within, and, start listening to what you're telling yourself and becoming aware, really aware.
Wow.
And even at my, chronological age, there's always surprises. You face an issue, and when you're examining your life or examining details of your life, all of a sudden, if you're looking deep within, is the way I put it, diving deep, rather than living on the surface of your life, you begin to become aware, why did I get upset about that stupid, foolish, my car broke down. Well, that used to really upset me. But because I'm doing this work, because I'm becoming aware, I stop and say, that really doesn't matter. Yeah, okay, it's a pain in my butt. It might be a pain in my wallet, but, tomorrow after it's fixed, the car will be fixed and it'll be all over. Why would I invest my mental real estate in being upset about all this? My dad was an educator, and one of the things he taught me many years ago is don't get upset about the things you have very little control over. And then he went on to explain how few things we have control over. But one thing we have control over is our mental real estate. So once you put those pieces together, by a workshop or by learning or reading or having a coach, those are the things that make a change for me personally.
Right.
Awesome. Wow. So I love it. George Alex said something about the cost of awareness is responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And it's being able to utilize our ability to respond to every situation with great awareness, like Dan just said. It's awesome. But to be 17, how do we teach this? How do we, impart that to these people?
Well, I think part of it, Coach, and the work that I do, this is Teresa, the work that I do is really working with the client first and foremost is to create a vision for themselves. What is it that they want to create to really be motivated by what they're looking to create? And if whatever their thought, their action, their awareness, if it's going to take them in that direction to say yes to whatever that action is, that thought is, to keep them moving closer to that. But I think the first and foremost thing is creating the path first that gives them the structure to keep saying yes or no to that particular structure, until it changes, until they find a higher level of whatever they want to do in their life. But for me, that's really where we start.
Right.
Right. It's interesting. Over the weekend, I've seen a friend that I haven't seen in a while, and so I can say her name. Her name is Joni, and so Joni has, this is one of the other addictions, that one of the subtle, aside from relationships and things like that, is hoarding and clutter, right? So Joni is not a hoarder, but Joni does have some organizational things that she wants to work on, and she explained to me that she had recently seen an ad for this woman. I'm not sure of her name, but she had the book on the table when I saw her, and she said that it was, this woman normally charges $250 an hour, but she was running a special for $25. Now, the only reason I'm laughing is because I thought, wow, that was an incredible special. But So I couldn't wait for her to tell me the rest because I almost heard the whole thing playing out in my head. So I said, well, did you see her? You mean for $25 she came out to the house and spent an hour with you? She goes, no, it was all on the phone. And I said, well, so when is she coming? And she said, well, she's not, because after she did her assessment, the woman determined that she was not committed enough. And so the coach, and I said to Joni as she was explaining to me, I said, Joni, you do know that for $25, there's a big commitment piece for you. And she goes, that's exactly what she said to me. And so it's interesting that whether, and I don't know, Coach, if you experience the same thing, but whether it's a student that Teresa and I are working with, or whether individually we have clients and so on, when they come initially, yes, there is the whole visioning. But it's interesting to see, and I don't think that this takes place. I think the point I'm trying to make is that with the younger generation, the 17 and 18, and right up to 25 and even 30, they are more committed, or at least it appears on the surface, more committed to doing the work as opposed to someone who has been, and regardless of what the age is, 50, 60, 70 years old, they get to a point in their life where they want the change, but they're not 100% invested. Their skin in the game doesn't come with commitment. And so there has to be, I thought that I was very impressed that this coach, because it could have been another client for her, it could have been a referral for her. But this coach and her confidence in herself and what she valued her service at was enough to say, I can't take you on as a client because I don't think that your level of commitment is where I need it to be.
Right, and so my role in that whole commitment piece is once I get the assessment back and the athlete receives a copy of the manual, I can see where they are with their level of commitment. It's a visual graph. It's like low, medium, or high. If it's low, then we both know we need to work on short-term and long-term goals. If it's medium, then we know that we need to emphasize it. And if it's high, we just need to mention it. But we still sharpen the saw. We don't allow that skill to just kind of go away. So it's interesting that the coach said, well, her commitment's not high enough, versus like, well, clearly your commitment's not high enough, but I can assist you, and this is what it will take in order to improve or increase your level of commitment. You follow me?
I do. I think, although I think that, like I said, when we're dealing with adults who are in their 50s and 60s, Coach, we become very set in our ways. I think it's harder to work with someone 51 versus someone 18, and I don't mean harder meaning our work is harder. I think that when you talked earlier about these young men, they really believe anything is possible right now. They haven't experienced enough yet to teach them all of the negative, the limitations, the lack, and so on. So they still see potential in future. Whereas someone in their midlife, I want to say midlife, because now that I'm 51, I want it to be midlife. With some of the people that I have worked with, not all, but some, and I want to say that the percentage, the reason I'm asking this is because when Teresa and I first announced our workshop about resolution success, we looked at the success rate for resolutions. And interestingly enough, 18% of resolutions succeed. 82% of them have failed 3 weeks into the new year.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that come from? I wonder how many of the 18% were children under 25.
Well, I'll tell you where it comes from. It comes from not keeping their word with themselves.
Right.
And not learning a skill or not learning to trust their word with themselves. And I mean, as young boys, as young girls, we have parents, and sometimes our parents tell us something, and then they don't follow through. So the little person has to learn how to navigate that that disconnect. And sometimes we grow up, but we never deal with that unresolved issue.
Mm-hmm. So, Coach, what do you think is their key motivation, the basketball players?
Well, survival. Survival would be first.
Survival for what?
Well, we have a diverse population. We have kids that come from, seven-figure families, and then we have kids whose parents make, $30,000 a year. So, out in between those lines, it's about surviving. It's about surviving another day of practice. It's about being able to demonstrate a skill that they can play. And so their motivation really becomes to show that they can do it. Do it meaning get recruited, go to a D1 school, and prove that they can do it. I mean, that's really, at the end of the day, that's what they're trying to do. That's their main motivation.
Right, and their motivation, it might be, I would imagine, when you explained the diverse group of students you have, the motivation to the child that comes from the seven-figure income and the motivation with the kid that comes from the $30,000 income, the survival is the $30,000. This is how I'm looking at it. The kid that's coming, and I'm not saying that this is so for all of the kids, but I would see that the motivation is different for each one of them. For the child that was raised in a very affluent lifestyle, it might be that they don't want to disappoint their parents. I have to. My parents are really counting on me to do this. Sometimes the motivation is more, and I wonder if that's. I have to believe that it is an issue. When the motivation is to please someone else other than yourself, it's a setup for failure.
Absolutely. External motivation, no question about it.
Right.
But then all athletes have to deal with that.
Well, I would expand your definition of survival, because some of the conversation here touched on this today. And you've got the survival in the physiological for the athlete. The physical, they've got to do the things that are required in that particular sport physically. But then you have the psychological survival for all of us. And you have another factor, which we also touched on, the spiritual survival. And you put them all together and you have a balanced individual. But what I heard you alluding to before is you're getting a lot of kids that don't have that balance, that maybe don't come with the value set.
Absolutely.
Right. So, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Coach.
Well, I was just going to say, again, it's understanding that the culture that we live in hasn't really prepared us to be spiritual astronauts. You know what I mean? That we haven't been really trained to introspect. We've been trained to externally do things.
Right.
So none of these kids are really scribbling little notes about, wow, I really got a hot temper when the official made a call, or, when coach called me in the office, I really got afraid. Or they're not taking those notes and converting that energy into power. They're just it's just dwindling away.
Right. And Coach, Teresa and I try to stress over and over again in every one of our workshops, there is a belief, it's been backwards for centuries and centuries, that we allow circumstances to dictate our feelings, hence our thoughts. And so what we encourage, and what our REACH workshops, one of the many things that it teaches, is that we are in charge and accountable, responsible for what it is we want to feel. And I'm wondering, is there a piece or a component in your coaching where you teach these young children who, and I call them children, young men, they would hate hearing me say that what does it feel like when they make a shot? what does that feel like? And so in building their self-esteem and their confidence, do you do any work with them, and have you introduced to them about choosing the feelings they want to feel and creating the thoughts that support the feeling? Do you follow me?
Absolutely. That's in my world called the power of the 3-foot toss.
Repeat that again. The power of what?
Of a 3-foot toss.
3-foot toss. Okay.
Right. So here's the power of the 3-foot toss. Basically, if we put in front of us, we put 3 rings in your right hand, and we put a little peg in front of you. Okay. We move back 3 feet, 6 feet, 9 feet, 12 feet, and 15 feet. And the goal is to get as many of the rings onto the peg. So you could step all the way back to 15 feet, or you could step and come close to 3 feet. The 3-foot is going to probably be more successful than the 15-footer. And so each time that 3-foot little ring goes on there, it's a victory. So your whole physiology is going to go, yes. And then you do another one, yes. Then you do another one, yes. So it's a small victory. And so what I attempt to assist the athletes to do is understand that repetition is the mother of all learning. So why not do small things well so that you can build the confidence? And they look at me like I'm crazy.
Right, I follow.
But that's the key to success, is being able to do small things well so you can build the muscle, so that when the challenging things come, you have the toughness to stay in there with it, because you know you're capable of doing it. That makes sense.
Right, it does. It does. I like the small victories leading up to the hoop, there it is type of thing. So I have one more question for you.
I have one too before we
Okay,
finish.
good. On your website, under What You Believe, you talk about, a player will show up for the game, but will they show up for practice? So this goes back to the whole commitment thing. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Whatever you do, it's up to you. It's done in your exactness. Your every act makes it a fact. You do just what you practice.
I like that, Coach.
Yeah, it's a great poem by Mr. Barnes. So basically what happens is practice, I say this to the guys constant, how you practice is how you play.
Ooh.
So it's in no way that I can expect myself to perform at one level when I only practice at another level.
So true.
And the same thing holds true for mentally. What I practice is basically what I'm going to do in a game. And up in New Haven when we were there, we didn't have enough pressure-like practices for the athletes. So when they were in front of 100 college coaches, they couldn't handle the pressure and they cracked. And so it was partly our responsibility for not setting up situation for them to be under pressure so that they could feel more comfortable in pressure situations. And it was on them as well to know that, I'm not handling pressure well. I need to increase my pressure attitude when I practice. So yes, the inner environment is a reflection of the external world.
So, Coach, thank you. Before we have to finish up here shortly, but I wanted to ask you the question. So the athletes that are making it to be accepted into the D1 or the D2, D3, whatever schools they want to go to, what are those success attributes that you see the ones that do get picked?
Dedication, discipline, They have an extreme ability to focus. And they have, passion is not the word. They have enthusiasm. They have a relentless enthusiasm about what they're doing. And then, it's all about timing and luck. I mean, I think it's when preparation meets opportunity, it's luck.
When preparation meets opportunity,
90% preparation, right?
Coach, this was a wonderful, wonderful, long-awaited, but it was worth the wait. This interview was wonderful. Thank you for sharing, and we will be in touch soon. I would love to engage more in this dialogue with you. But I can't thank you enough for sharing all that you have from Elevate. And this post will be on our website, thisorbetter.com. So for our audience that might not have been able to see the show, you can follow the interview on thisorbetter.com. And so for now, we do have to say good night. But again, thank you, Coach Selby. It was well worth the wait. Have a wonderful week.
You're welcome.
Thank
Great,
you.
and much success with Reach.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right.
You gonna wrap up? So join us in 2 weeks. We'll be back on the radio here at rocklandworldradio.com. So please join us again 2 weeks from today. Have a good night. Safe travels.
Thank you.
Good job.
I'm independent. You know it. You love it. You can't live without it. Rockland World Radio.